Amaya Duncan, and I'm a part of the Reuben H. Fleet Science Center's PWISE program. The Reuben H. Fleet Science Center is sponsoring this panel today, and BWISE is their program for young girls interested in science. It stands for Better Education for Women in Science and Engineering. And you can get your girls involved in 7th grade. Thank you. So now we have our panelists. Give a little wave when I say your name. We have Dr. Allison Coyle. She's an astrophysicist and professor at the University of California, San Diego, the Associate Dean for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion there. Next, we have Dr. Elena Blanco Suarez. She's a research associate, postdoctoral researcher, and neuroscientist at the Salk Research Institute. Now we have Sarah Tarkoff, executive, She's the executive story editor of the TV show Arrow and the writer of the YA sci-fi novel Sinless. Next, we have Monica Owusu-Breen. She's the producer and writer for Midnight Texas, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Fringe, and Elias.
All right.
Maria Ferrari. Executive producer and writer for The Big Bang Theory. Shirley Deese. Senior Engineer of Systems and Software in Aerospace Systems, and Chairperson of the San Diego Professional Chapter of National Society of Black Engineers. And lastly, we have Nora Zuckerman, producer and writer for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Suits, Haven, Human Target, and Fringe. Okay, so now we're going to kick off the panel with our first question. What shows and characters were inspiring to you? Anyone can start.
All right, I'll start. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. How are you doing? All right. Welcome to Comic-Con. I want you guys to know this is the first for me. I would walk around on the sidewalks and watch the people and wonder who were these people, all right? You know, now I'm hooked, okay? Yeah, so anyway, what's most important to me is with the characters, I don't know if anyone saw Black Panther. Who saw Black Panther? Well, Suri was it for me, all right? Suri wanted me, she made me want to go back 10 years and do all the stuff that people had told me was not possible to do. All right, so now when I go to work, I am so invigorated because I see young women that are coming behind me that are just gonna do such outstanding things, all right? And that's such an inspiration to me. It makes me want to continue on.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah. So I'm gonna say the most unpopular thing right now. I didn't watch Black Panther. I'm sorry.
Oh.
But I was inspired. I know, I will. But what inspired me, do you remember Aliens, like the one back in 1979?
Yeah.
I wasn't even born. But do you remember, like, I'm shocked that no one ever talks about Ripley. Like, she was, like, amazing. She was a scientist. She didn't have any romantic motivation, or, you know, she wasn't trying to save anything but her own ass. So that was very, you know, like, I love that. When I watched that movie the first time, I was like, wow, this woman rocks. Yeah. And then I got inspired by Alien because I was really attracted by the whole life cycle of those monsters. because it took me a while to understand as a child. I was like, what was first? Is it the egg? Is it the thing that jumps in the face and then the thing that bursts the chest? I was like, so I was just like trying to draw it, and my dad was like, those things don't exist. And I was like, oh, okay. But he was like, but you know, there are other stuff like parasites and things like these that are also awesome. And I was like, oh, okay. And he explained a little bit. He's an economist, so he has no idea about biology. But he inspired me, and I actually started in a microbiology lab. Then I moved on to the brain because it's awesome. So now I'm a neuroscientist, and yeah, I think that was my like starter, yeah.
We're doing the scientist answer this question? Okay. So I am old enough that there actually weren't very many women characters when I was growing up. So I read a lot of Nancy Drew. I would say Nancy Drew was my first. She's a detective, but it's actually very, very similar. She basically has the same job that I do. You know, there's questions, you get clues, you put together a story, and you try to convince everyone else that your story is right. That's basically my day. More recently, honestly, Wonder Woman, when there's a no man's land and the guys are like, we just can't figure it out. We've been here for a year. We don't know what's going on. Like, we're just stuck. And she's like, step aside. And she goes out and she pulls out her shield. And then the men are like, oh, we can do all these things. I was like, that's like my job. She's awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, in terms of television, like I think Dana Scully on the X-Files is like very inspiring, and like she questioned everything, and I think she's a great role model.
Can we talk about the Scully effect?
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know if this is a real thing, but if you Google it, there's a thing called the Scully effect, which 5 years ago at Comic-Con, Gillian Anderson was on a panel, and she talked about it. And it's the idea, I don't know if it's been proven, but that because of X-Files and her character in particular, and because it was such a realistic character, and it was an aspirational character and a three-dimensional character, and she was also like a nice, kind human as well, in addition to being a badass scientist. A lot of women have said that they went into science or wanted to go into the FBI because of her. So she got lots of letters from young women saying that they went into these fields. And then when she was on the panel, she said often when she did panels, people spoke about that too. So it's called the Scully effect.
Oh.
It has its own Wikipedia page, I think.
Oh, cool.
Okay. How do writers get inspired to write strong female scientist characters, and where do they draw their inspiration in real-world knowledge?
I'm going to say the other women on this panel, the awesome scientists on this panel, actual real-world people.
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely, like, we usually go from character first, and I think having a scientist character, I work on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., as did Monica, and Fitz and Simmons are such a big part of that show, but they're also the heart of the show, which has been, like, such a joy to write for, and why they have such a huge fan base, because not only are, like, they always the smartest people in the room, but, you know, I think they stand for something fantastic, and it's an honor to write for them. And
it's funny working on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. the first 2 years. Nora came in after I left. And what I loved about Simmons is her curiosity, because I'd written scientists before, and they were just facts and information. And for her, there was a joy in discovery. It was like exciting. And even if it was disgusting what she discovered, it was exciting that she discovered something new that's disgusting.
Yeah.
And there was a joy in her, and the idea of posing questions and answering them that made her such a vibrant and fun character and such a different perception of scientists,
Right.
which is not tortured. It's actually curious and questioning and loving every minute of it, which is
Yeah.
fun.
And I think Elizabeth brings that to the character too. She's got this like she's got this like inner glow to her, and so the character really comes through.
Yeah.
I think.
I'm lucky enough to have a couple good friends who are women and scientists, and one of my friends was a postdoc when I started Big Bang, and then went to work for pharma, so that's been really
Oh,
useful
wow.
for me. And I've just been emailing them and being like, so what's the dumbest thing you ever did at work? Like, for literally, like, before there were even female scientists on my show, I was using their stories for the guys because the stories were both ways.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah,
I
of
wanted
course.
to ask the writers, like, do you know a lot of women scientists, and do you feel like you need to know more? Because it does seem like getting real-world examples would be incredibly helpful.
It would be, and it's interesting because usually a lot of men have been brought in as
Yeah.
counsel, but it's interesting also because, we're also female writers, and sort of there are intersections to working in a male-dominated profession where you have to defend your point of view even when people don't agree with it and assert your right to be there. And so I feel like there are similarities, but of course, I mean, it's interesting when you ask for consultants how often you have to sort of specify if you do want a female consultant.
Yay, good.
How do real-life female scientists differ from those portrayed in television, and why are they portrayed in a certain way?
Okay. No, I'll take it. Well, first of all, I think one of the things that I face all the time is I came from a family where my grandmother and my mothers were fashionistas. So they grew us up, me and my sister, being very fashionable. So all my life, I wear fashion to work. And so, of course, no one thinks I'm an engineer. Everyone always thinks I'm either the secretary or, in the accounting department. No one thinks that, I belong in the lab or, that, I'm an engineer or a scientist. And then when I walk in the room and people look at me, and it's mostly males, and I'm usually sometimes the only female at the table, and then everybody would say, okay, Shirley, what are we going to do here? Okay, and then people are like, oh, is that the engineer? And everybody's like, yeah, that's Shirley. I thought you knew, all right? So, yeah, Shirley, it's me, okay? What else would I be if I'm not an engineer, okay? So, but I got my inspiration from, I know it's a lot of Trekkies here, Ororo. I mean, growing up as a little girl, watching her, tell the captain what to do or give him those looks, I give those looks right now, all right? So, so lieutenant was very prominent for me. But yeah, the stereotype is that no one that looks like me could have a background in engineering with advanced degrees and be on multi-million-dollar projects. All right.
I think as a writer, you have a choice between, I'm trying to tell a story, I'm trying to convey something, and I can either do the sort of expedient thing and lean into the stereotype, and my scientist is going to come along, and I want you to know he's a scientist, so I'm going to lean into your mental picture of a scientist and make him Dr. Frank from The Simpsons, and he's the geeky dude, and you sort of have that picture in your mind. But when you're creating characters who are going to go on for more than one sentence, and you want to lean away from the cliche. I think you have a choice between, do I want to lean into the stereotype, or do I want to do something different and subvert it? And and ultimately, I think with every character as a writer, you have that choice to make.
I feel like in terms of representing scientists, as long as you represent anything that is not a white male about 50 years of age, you're gonna be diverse already.
That's true.
But, so it's nice to see, like even just female scientists. But then, for instance, I'm a neuroscientist, so for the last few years I got a lot, you don't look like Amy.
Right.
Which I'm like, well, thank you. But there are neuroscientists who would be like Amy, but it's not because of science, it's just, we are humans, and humans are diverse. So, I don't know, it's just funny how, like everyone pictures these old men, like kind of
Yes.
scruffy and crazy doing science. It's like, I mean, well, I met a couple like that, but you know, it's actually not the main thing in science, I would say. I don't know if anyone knows more of those kind of scientists, but
I found it so inspiring to see Wonder Woman and see like actually an evil female scientist. I don't know if you guys I was like, she could have been the bad guy for the whole movie and I would have been thrilled. And she was so like, she had this cool look and was kind of like beautiful and evil at the same time. And I found that to be like so refreshing. And like I was, you know, I'd hoped there was a little more of her. Maybe, I don't know if there's cut scenes, but she was fantastic. I found that to be inspiring, that we can have, you know, I feel like, you know, portraying female scientists, having them actually be the bad guy sometimes is probably not necessarily a bad thing.
No, I was
because, you know.
It matches real life, too.
Yeah.
No. I was thinking about, you know, when you ask what inspired us. When I was a kid, I loved Dr. Frankenstein. I loved the person who was so inspired to like bring life back that he was willing to do the sickest things in order to do it. And some of my favorite characters, like Walter Bishop on Fringe, is crazy, but crazy because he's asking these questions that are sort of insane and has this emotional like drive to save his son. It's a long story. But my point being, part of also wanting a diversity of visions is to also let the women not only be aspirational too, because there also are people driven mad by questions and people driven mad by life circumstances, and the way that male scientists get that richness of story, whether it's you're the hero or you're the villain or you're the mad scientist doing evil or good for evil for good reasons or whatever. You want that kind of diversity for your female, because otherwise you're just the really great one. And sometimes that's also not the character you remember as much as, you know, Dr. Frankenstein lives in infamy because he tried to bring something back from the dead and it worked.
Well, off of the Dr. Frankenstein thing, you know, that character was written by a woman, by Mary Shelley.
Exactly.
And the history of that book is she had just suffered a miscarriage. And was trying, you know, basically was telling this story of I brought something into the world and it wasn't what I wanted it to be, and the only way she could tell that story was with a male protagonist, and so she basically invented a new genre to tell a female story
about loss
so,
and
you know,
desire for life. I know I think we also need to feel free to like explore the darker stories that come out of a female experience like that.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see the like Theranos movie that's coming out. So
Yeah.
I want to see that woman's story, as complex and probably messed up as it is.
Yeah.
Really cool.
I just read that book.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Theranos, the book's called Bad Blood. It's about Elizabeth Holmes. She's one of the first women in Silicon Valley to run a company and was basically a fraud.
Yeah.
It's very fascinating. I really like this discussion a lot. I think women in real life are just much more complex, and I really appreciated the discussion about, as a writer, whether you go with the stereotype or not. And I definitely understand that for expedience reason, and if it's a sitcom versus a drama, like, it's going to be relevant. But I do feel like the main answer to this question is just that in real life, women are all kinds of different ways and have families and hobbies and aren't all totally geeky and completely obsessed 100% of the time with what they're doing. People like that exist, but people like that also don't exist, and we just don't see that full range. Like, you're right, the men get a lot more range than the women.
There's a lot more of them. Like, that's one of the problems with representation, is that if you don't have a bunch of female scientists, then
That's right.
you can't convey that women are not just one way.
That's right. If you get one or two, as opposed to 10.
Yeah.
Yep.
How do things differ with female scientists of color in the lab or in on-screen representation?
Oh, I guess I'm a woman of color.
Go. I got you.
All right. Okay, so women of color in the lab?
Lab or on-screen?
On screen, okay. I want to build upon what they said. I like seeing women of color sometimes be badass and do some awful things, okay? All right, I think about doing awful things in the... Sometimes I think about doing awful things while I'm in the lab, but of course, I know I can't because of, a whole lot of reasons, all right? Most importantly, I like my paycheck, all right? And I must say, yeah, let's clap, all right? Even though I'm probably getting paid, less than the men, and I do most of the work, I don't mind saying that. But it's still the fact that, I do like the fact that, in the lab, we really are equal. I mean, it's getting to the point where we get to sit at the table and we get to design things and blow things up and create things and, and when they say what happened, we say, hey, we don't know. We still researching to find out, all right, it didn't really work the way we wanted it to. And I think more and more women are being able to feel comfortable saying that. Whereas probably this picture I have up here, I don't know how many people saw the movie Hidden Figures. Did a lot of you? Well, this is Mary Jackson, and Mary Jackson was the first African-American woman to get an engineering degree in the United States. And it was somewhere like in 1950 or something, which was not that long ago, all right? And she was the one, if you saw the movie, that was dealing with the wind tunnel, all right? And that gentleman, encouraged her to become an engineer and to work on things. And that's one of the things that I try to do. I work with a lot of young women, especially women of color. Being the chair of the National Society of Black Engineers, our mission is to try to impact the community and to impact it positively. And we want to be able to encourage, all young people to be everything and anything that they want to be. And, I see myself having to continue on as a Mary Jackson. I have to encourage people to go where no one has been before, because someone encouraged me, to go in. And again, sometimes I'm the only person of color in the room. It shouldn't be that way. But it is because I have continued to be an engineer. I have not allowed the men or the world to push me out of that arena.
I also think from the writing perspective and producing perspective, it's vitally important to have diversity of producers and writers. Because when you get in a room and you write a character and someone questions you, like, well, would an engineer be an African-American woman with a child? You're like, yeah. And they actually won't argue too much to your face because they're talking to a black woman too. Like in a weird way, because there is, and I don't think it's always intentional, but there's a shorthand.
Yes.
This person looks like a person who has power. This person looks like a person who does
Absolutely.
not. This person looks like a mom. This person doesn't. And there's a fear that if you put someone on screen who doesn't immediately wear the suit right,
Absolutely.
that your audience is going to be confused. Now, sometimes Hollywood leads, but sometimes Hollywood is a little backtracked. And I do feel like you go to universities and you see much more diversity than you would see
Absolutely now.
on television. So I think it's up to us too to constantly force not the easy solution to move through casting, but to constantly make people justify why these characters have to be white or male, or why a scientist, or why a doctor, or why do these characters have to fit that? And I do think once you start pushing on that, most people will concede that maybe we should look for the,
Yeah. No, I think the biggest difference between women of color in the lab and on screen is that there's just more in the lab.
Yeah.
You just don't see them as much on the screen.
Absolutely.
And we need to, because it shouldn't be so hard as a woman of color to stay in engineering, and it wouldn't be so hard if, honestly, we saw more on the screen, so that there's a lot of talk about the need for role models, for women scientist role models, and the role that the media can play there. And for young women, the focus is always on young women need to see role models. I actually think that young men also need to see women scientists.
And old men.
And all men. And the reason is so that we stop having this default of scientist, oh man, and white man.
Yeah.
And the default just becomes a human, which is what scientists are. So I think it's really, really, I think it's much more important than people even realize.
Yes.
I actually didn't realize that women, like the lack of women in science or representation of women in science was a problem until I started working. Because I grew up and all my biology teachers and chemistry teachers were always women.
Yes.
So I thought science was a woman's thing.
Yeah.
That's how oblivious I was. I grew up in Spain. It's not like different or anything. It's not like Spain super progressive or anything. But anyway, so for me it was kind of a shock when I started working and I was like, oh, this is actually an issue. But now I'm in a 100% women's lab. Like, I love that because it's not, I mean, I guess it's not that common. I don't know, maybe I'm again on a bubble or something and I think everything's fine. But yeah, it's like having those female roles, mentoring, all that stuff is super important because then you just grow up thinking that's it's normal to see women of color, women, and everyone's included. Like, this shouldn't even be an issue to discuss, right? Like,
I think part of the problem is that a lot of writers spend a lot more time watching television than we do in like actual science labs. So I think as the demographics of those labs have been changing, I think we haven't necessarily been witness to that.
you can visit our lab.
I was gonna
Anytime,
say,
Really?
yeah.
we need
Okay,
field
I'm
trips
gonna
for
take
you
you up
guys.
on that.
Yeah.
Anytime, please come. Yeah.
Yeah, so the Fleet Center can be sponsoring field trips for the writers to come to the labs. That would be great.
All right.
Yeah.
I would totally do that.
Get on that, Fleet
Great.
Center. Okay, so why is it important for young audiences to see characters who look like them or diverse characters represented in media when they're watching TV?
I think if you see it, you feel like you can be it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
Simple as that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I feel like as a professor now watching women go from high school to undergrad to grad to postdoc to faculty, there's just a lot of sometimes seen and often unseen forces pushing them aside that they often aren't even really aware of. And you have to really talk to women about why they got interested in what their current experience is. And when you start digging into their current experience, especially as they go up through their career, on the whole, people become more and more aware of the biases and the barriers. And so not just to see it when you're young, that like I can be that, but to actually keep women in the fields too. And that's also to my point about like why the men need to see it as well, so that they treat the women equally, because right now they don't, but they don't even realize it.
Well, yeah, the response needs to be not just only surprise or like good for you, you know, but like if you have a model on television, then it's like, oh, that's a thing that I can identify in the world.
Yeah, and it's normal. Yeah.
So something that has come up in a lot of studies is in elementary school, boys and girls tend to have a similar level of interest in STEM. But then as the girls get older, especially around high school age, they tend to lose interest. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's because it's just not enough people encouraging girls or empowering them to feel like they could be anything they want to be. I mean, when I talk to young people, especially young women, I really do talk to them about how much money they can make as an engineer, all right? Because I really do think that, you know, when I was fortunate, I had two older brothers who went into engineering, but my mother knew I was smarter than them. I mean, she always knew, I'm sorry, I was her favorite, God bless her. But anyway, she really did tell me, you're smarter than your brothers, you know, because I really didn't think about being an engineer, you know. I wanted to be a flight attendant. I like to travel. So, you know, she said, what are you going to do? I said, well, I think I'll be a flight attendant. I, you know, can travel the world. And she was like, no, you're going to be an engineer, and then you'll make enough money, and you can travel wherever you want to, whenever you want to, okay? So, yay, Mom. So I do think, you know, I went to school. A lot of the women, we were top in our class, and I was one of the only few that was like, no, I'm going to go to school to be an engineer. And they was like, really? That's hard, you know. And I was like, yes. I said, but did you see the paychecks? I was like, do you know how much money they make? I was like, I saw how much money they make. I'm going to go get that money, all right? So I think sometimes, men are encouraged to pursue higher paying careers. And, and women, we don't get to find out about that, all right? And all through my years of engineering school, I have my advanced degrees. It was tough sometimes. I gave up weekends. I gave up dates. I had to give up a lot. I cried many a night because I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get this, but I knew what the results were gonna get me. And that's what I try to tell all young people, but especially young women, that there is an opportunity out there. And I want you to know, I have absolutely traveled the world. And I've traveled the world sometime on the company dime, all right? And the weird thing is, I have male managers that ask me, do I have a passport? I'm like, really? All right? Is that the best you can ask me? All right, when I tell you I want to do the international assignment, is do I have a passport? Come on. It's like, of course I do, all right? The United States give people passports, all right? So, yeah, I think we're just not showing them what the real benefits are of going into the scientists.
This is something that's been really important to me this year, and like we talked about not writing scientists aspirationally, but to some extent, like I want to show these girls enjoying their money, and I want to show these girls being proud of their work, or getting promoted, or having just good relationships, like all of the fringe benefits that can come with like having a really rock solid career that you worked a long time to get, and that now you're sort of reaping the benefits. And I think that there is something lovely and aspirational in that doesn't always get explored.
Yeah, I think that this lack of interest, it's just cultural. It's not inherent. I think you're right. It's that often young women aren't pushed as hard. I got pushed really hard because they're like, oh, you're good at math. Oh, that's weird. I was like, I'm really good at like writing. And they're like, no, you're good at math. You're doing math. I got pushed really hard. But that's rare. And then I also think that it's not cool. And I know here it's cool. We all get that it's cool. That's why we're here. But most people, especially in high school, I feel like, you can answer this better. She just graduated from high school.
Yeah.
Thank you. But it's just not considered cool when people get to the age where they start caring what the opposite or same sex cares about them. They all of a sudden, like the women, the girls stop talking about science as much. There's this fear that they won't be as cool. And that's where I feel like the media, and I think like things like Big Bang Theory have really helped a lot to make people realize, no, this is cool.
I've also read these studies that we tend to praise young girls for being smart, and because boys are more likely to just have trouble doing their work, and just at that age you have trouble focusing, they tend to be praised for trying hard. And so over the course of your, so that causes girls to say, oh, I've come up against something difficult, I must not be smart.
Yes.
Which is just, so science is hard. And so I think we really need to, just say it's okay to struggle, and, just praise girls for trying more so than you're smart of it all.
Yeah, it's the growth mindset. So Carol Dweck has done research on this. I talk about this I teach freshman physics to biology majors who have to take it and they don't want to be taking it. It's a wonderful class. And I talk to them a lot about this mindset of you don't have to be intrinsically good at math or physics. You can pass this class, but you have to put effort in. And because a lot of the women in particular, sometimes the men come in and they just think, I'm not good at this. And that mindset just keeps them from being able to work through the problem slowly enough. So I think that's a huge part of it.
It absolutely is, because I'm going to make a confession. I did not make an A in physics. But I can tell you, I still make a good paycheck. All right, and I did let my professor know, because he didn't want to give me credit for a problem I solved, because he said I didn't solve it the way that he wanted it solved. But I explained to him I solved it and got the right answer, so that was not going to hold me back from getting a job. Okay, so yeah, I got a job. Okay, so And I think I'm smart. I think I'm smart.
There are studies that show that teachers call on the boys more than they call on the girls when they have their hands raised. So that wasn't just you that happened to.
Okay, I think we're going to move on to our last question before we start doing audience questions. What do we think the future should look like for young girls, for female scientists, for people in the lab?
Better.
Yeah. Yeah. We need more Suris. Suris,
Yeah.
yes. Young women, be Suri. I mean, like she said when she helped the guy to walk again, and he was like, oh, this is a miracle. She said, no, it's technology. That's what it is. It's all about technology, and technology is colorblind. It's gender blind. It doesn't care. I mean, go out, solve it. I mean, you want, the professor and I was talking about this. You know, in engineering, we don't get it right the first time. It takes us a long time sometimes to get it right. There are multiple iterations we have to go through. And that's okay, because every time we go through an iteration, we learn something new, all right? And we learn something to build upon. So, you know, I want to encourage anybody, it doesn't matter what age you are, but especially you young people, I want to retire. All right? and I want to retire knowing, all right, that there are some people coming behind me, you know, that are just thinking out of the box and willing to do anything to advance this world, all right? So I can't encourage you enough to, it's about the technology. It's about the technology.
Yeah, I think we've talked a lot about how film and TV have been lagging behind, you know, the real world representation of scientists. But you know, there's one place where I think it is doing really well. I recently started writing for YA books, and that is a very female-driven market. And the characters, you know, so you see a lot of great representations of female scientists. You know, diverse and complex. And you know, I think that's sort of a little peek at what our future could be in terms of.
And the good news is all those books are being made into
Yes.
shows. and
Yeah.
everything.
So just wait like 2 or 3 years, and then and then you'll see it on your screen.
I think we need better maternity and better integration of parenting into workplaces. I think that's a problem that needs fixing.
Yeah, and I think we need more female characters, not just in the lab, but running the lab. Like, I loved in The Martian when the ship commanders is a woman, and it's not even a thing. I was like, yes. We need more of that, like running, like 50% of them should be running things. Yeah.
I saw a movie yesterday. I didn't like it, but they had this very good scene that they are saying, "Oh, you are sending all-women team," and they reply, "It's an all-scientist team." So you know, yes.
Good.
None of you are the writers, right? I think I didn't get it anyway. So I really love that scene because it says a lot of how the future should be. Like as Shirley was saying, it's about the technology, about the knowledge, about the science. It shouldn't matter if you are white or black or women. I mean, you know, we need more representation of all those, so then everyone feels like they can be scientists, and no one's gonna come to you being like, "Oh, I cannot be a scientist because I'm a girl." Like,
Yeah, we need a culture of inclusivity, because right now it's still pretty much exclusivity.
yeah.
Okay, I think we're going to open the floor to questions. If you'd like to line up behind the mic, thank you guys. Perfect, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Allie. I actually work with Elena, so
Hi, Allie.
she doesn't have to answer
Hey, Allie.
because we can talk about it next week. But you've all kind of touched on this already a little bit, and I'm wondering if you can talk about it in more depth. Having female role models for girls and encouraging girls to go into STEM is really great and awesome, but obviously there's this whole leaky pipeline issue. And so part of it is about supporting women in STEM once they're already in STEM careers. And I'm curious, especially with this panel of people from such diverse perspectives as writers and scientists, do you have specific ideas for how the media portrayal of female scientists can help with those issues? Are there things that we could be portraying in books or in film, on TV, that could help support women in STEM, that could help bring awareness to the issues that women in STEM face?
Yeah, I think for starters, just talking about the issues, like everyone should know what imposter syndrome is. When undergrad women learn what that is, just learning what that is helps them. Learning about stereotype threat and what that is, learning about unconscious bias, just knowing about this would be a huge step forward, because people, from what I've seen from the students I've worked with, have very similar experiences, but they don't talk to each other, and so they think that it's just them. And if people would just talk about it, that alone would go a really long way. So I think that's one place where the media could really help.
Yeah, and what the National Society of Black Engineers, we do very well is we do mentor. And at my job, I mean, unfortunately, I don't know why, but everyone seems to know who I am. I can't figure it out. All right. But when new people come into the company, I mean, one of the things that, especially if they're in engineering, they say, do you know Shirley? I want you to introduce you to Shirley, all right? You need to get to know Shirley. And, you know, I have a reputation of really talking to people and telling it to them the way that it is. And I think it's like she said, we have to start having dialogue about these things. We have to start talking about what is really happening. And if you're coming into a work environment every day, you know, especially as a new engineer, male or female, there are a lot of things that you're faced with, and you're correct. You don't know how to handle them. And you need people, you know, out there. And I really try to be that person. And I also try to encourage my upper management. You know, I just had a talk with them not too long ago about, hey, you know, you need to recognize people, especially, you know, people of color, when they do something in these staff meetings or in your management letters or whatever. Don't always, you know, let it be, you know, the Ralphs or the Roberts or whatever. You know, do some of the Sheilas and the Marys, and you know, they've done things too. You know, so we have a lot of educating and a lot of work to do, but it definitely, we got to keep having those dialogues and not be uncomfortable with the conversations.
I wish I have a supervisor like you, Shirley, when I was going through grad school. My question actually is for the scientists. There's a lot of societal barriers for women in STEM, especially women in higher positions. For example, people just assume that, you know, once you get married, get pregnant, you'll probably leave the company. So why invest in the first place? What are your thoughts on what media can do to help portray, make that less of an issue for, you know, for the rest of us who are in science? And for the writers, have you ever had to fight for a character to be female rather than male? Because one of the things I've noticed is that there are a lot of characters out there who don't necessarily need to be male. They just male because the male writer created them, so they're automatically male.
I can answer that. I say we do a lot. I mean, I think sometimes, you know, on some shows I've worked on, the casting is sort of gender blind, and but I work with my sister, who's right there. Say hi. But we've worked on shows where we've written, you know, characters as female, and then we look at the casting tapes and we're like, why are half of these dudes, you know? And so, you know, you kind of, you fight for it, and I think also sometimes just raising the question, can this be a woman? And someone goes, oh, yeah, great. It's just literally having somebody in the room ask the question, and, you know.
And sometimes, and this doesn't happen now. I do feel like things have changed, but
Yeah,
like
it's gotten better,
15
yeah.
years ago, it was very often that you'd pitch a woman in charge, and you'd be told, well, would anyone listen to her? And you're like, guess not, because you're not listening to me. I should look for another job soon, because this is not going to really help me. So yeah, I mean, there are those moments where someone's really naked, and you're like, you immediately want to leave, because you realize your future is also limited if you're boss can't see a version of reality where a woman can be in charge. But I do think when you're a woman working in this industry, because I do think, you know, being a mother and being a writer, it's the same, like,
Yes.
women are terrified to tell their boss they're pregnant. Like, it'll be like, I'm getting fat. I'm getting fat from, like, oh, by the way, I'm gonna have a baby next week. Don't get mad at me. So, like, I do, but that's changing, and I do feel like representation, at least in television, I do think the more showrunners who are women, the more seconds who are women, the more women's voices are just present, it becomes impossible not to show positive representations of women handling everything women handle all the time, every day.
And I think like on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that we
Yeah.
worked on, like, that's it, like, it's a very diverse cast, and it's almost just like nobody, like, a lot of people don't even recognize, like, it's
Yeah.
just kind of like, you know, we have 2 Asian female leads, we have, you know, we have a Latina woman, and it's like, so right now, basically,
But it's
we
also-
have one of the most diverse casts on
Right.
television, but, like, it's,
And diverse showrunners, too.
Yeah, and
which is-
diverse
and
showrunners,
a female
absolutely.
showrunner. So you're
and I
just
think that
like-
helps, you know, and yeah, having people in power that are making those decisions is everything.
You could also have male characters have a child, because it turns out men have children
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
And they could
Right.
they could take parental leave,
Yes.
and you could
Yes.
show the wife going back to work and the guy staying home. It's just
Yeah,
thought.
I mean, it'd be nice to like have, you know, in interviews where they talk to like female showrunners, or it's always like, how do you you know, how's your work-life balance? Can you have a family and run a TV show? And like men never get that question.
Right,
even
they don't
though,
have children.
in theory, they are parents as well.
They
so,
do have them.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Okay, so I think we are running out of time right now. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for being on this panel. This was wonderful.
Incredible.
Oh, we have 5 more minutes.
Got 5 minutes? So they were up.
Oh, wait.
Oh,
Yeah. All right.
does the girl in the Incredibles costume want to go up? I think you were the
Okay,
first one in the
4
line.
minutes.
Yeah.
4 minutes.
Okay, all right. Okay. Oftentimes, women strive to succeed their goals and persevere. They're seen as bossy instead of being a boss. How have you experienced this, and how have you overcome it?
Oh, okay. Well, I know I've been called bossy, all right, and the other B word too, all right, and probably a few more others. You have to own who you are, all right. I think at the end of the day, though, people say that I care, all right, and I just think, first of all, you have to, like Michael Jackson said, you gotta confront the man in the mirror, and you have to start with yourself, and you know, find that compassion and stuff in yourself. But sometimes you just have to be firm, you know. And you know, my mom said, you know, sometimes people are gonna call you things that's not nice, but you need to know who you are, you know. So that's how I deal with it.
And I think if you're the boss and someone calls you bossy, you kind of have to call them on it, because it's
Yeah.
in the job description.
Right.
So, like, just cut me some slack, because I got to boss you around.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there is a way to have a sense of humor about it, but you can't not own your authority
Right.
because someone else might be freaked out by that, too, because then you're not doing your job.
Right.
And like, don't worry so much if people are gonna like you. Like, you're good. They're gonna like you. It's fun. Like, don't worry about it.
Do we have time for one more question?
Do we?
Okay.
2
so
minutes,
with the-
okay.
Okay, with the wake of the Me Too movement, in your opinion, are modern day TV shows and movies portraying enough of the issues like sexism and sexual assault or sexual harassment or assault that real women face in the workplace every day?
I think they are more now. I think because of the conversation, especially in our industry in television, I think a lot of it's been very public. You know, people who've been accused, and so I think there's more of a conversation now, and that just naturally becomes part of the discussion you have in the writers' room. And I think you're gonna, as you watch shows, see a lot more things being portrayed and a lot more honesty than
I
there
actually
was
think
before.
science needs to follow Hollywood here. We haven't been having those discussions in science as much,
Right.
because it's much more hierarchical.
Right.
So I actually think Hollywood is showing the rest of us how to do this.
Yeah. In engineering, they're having more conversation, because it happens too. All right. You know, I've had experiences being a female in such a male-dominant industry. But I think she's correct. I think more and more dialogue that's going on in TV, they're having more dialogue in corporate America too.
Good question.
Yeah, I want the other male too.
So I was really excited when I heard about this panel because I look up at the table and I see a diverse group of strong female leaders and strong female role models in STEM and strong female writers who create strong female characters who in turn become strong female role models for the younger generations.
Can we just be female roles? Do we like?
Of course.
I'll take
of course.
strong. I'll take.
But we are all strong.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm joking with you. Okay.
And I know we have a long way to go as a society, especially in America, but I just wanted to say thank you. Please keep doing what you're doing. The youth are watching. Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
I'm sorry. The last one was a drill, but this one's for real now.
Yeah.
Thank you
Go
very
for it.
much.
Oh,
And
we can't let him go for it.
I've been told I'm out of time. I'm sorry, guys.
Oh.